Hi, I'm Jasmine, the sequel, and I am not relatable. A special thank you to my patrons, Wild Rose, Lauren Chris, That British Unicorn, Jam Beans, Debbie Elliott, and D. Higgins. So we're finally going to do the video that I've been talking about and promising you guys forever. We're going to be talking about why intuitive eating sucks. My entire setup here is basically the equivalent of one dude holding a phone from 2007 in their mom's basement. So I don't have a teleprompter, needless to say. Everything that I'm reading to you, I'm telling you, is going to be coming from my own notes and from my brain, which, if y'all don't know, my brain is... It's not great at remembering names and dates, which is sort of important for things like scientific studies. As it stands, I'm probably going to be throwing them up on screen rather than quoting them. As I improve at this, I am hoping that that gets better, but for now, fingers crossed. Second thing, yes, I do in fact have a nice, beautiful, swivelly chair. This is a throw. I'm always cold, so I'm going to keep this here so that when I get cold, I can just sort of burrito myself into it. All of that is to say that, hey, nice to see you guys. This video is filmed with the most up-to-date of setups, so everything pre-filmed is going to look a little bit different, and let's get right into it, shall we? So, intuitive eating. What is it? Where did it come from? And what's kind of happening with it right now? Intuitive eating has been around in one form or another for actually a pretty long period of time. It's give or take a pretty old practice. That said, it was popularized due to a book written by two dietitians named Elise Rich and Evelyn Tripoli. And they wrote a book. It's called The 10 Principles of Intuitive Eating. This is not a review of that book. It's just not. The fundamental fact of the matter is that regardless of what's written in that book, most people are basing intuitive eating on what they've seen on the internet, on YouTube, on Instagram, what their favorite celebrities and, just personalities that they like have told them about this movement. So it has very little to actually do with the book. So the merits of the book itself, I'm going to discuss, but only vaguely. They do, however, have a website, right? So I will be referring to that website extensively because this movement has really taken a hold of in the Western world, but specifically in the United States. The rates of obesity in the United States are skyrocketing, and a lot of people are clinging to the fat liberation, fat activism movements. The thing is that those groups, the way they utilize intuitive eating, the way they present intuitive eating is a little bit different from the book. Most people are not going to read the book. They're going to look at what their favorite celebrities are saying. They're going to maybe check the website, and they're going to go from there. So those are the principles that I'm actually going to be talking about. I'm going to talk about the 10 principles on the website. I'm going to go through them. And I'm going to tell you guys what I think about each one of those things. The 10 principles of intuitive eating are as follows. Number 1, reject the diet mentality. 2, honor your hunger. 3, make peace with food. 4, challenge the food police. 5, discover the satisfaction factor. 6, feel your fullness. 7, cope with your emotions with kindness. 8, respect your body. 9, movement, feel the difference. And 10, honor your health, gentle nutrition. Now, before we get into the 10 principles themselves, I want to state a couple of things right off the bat that you guys should know about when it comes to intuitive eating, right? First, foremost, the studies done for intuitive eating are actually very, very weak, right? That is not to say that there has been no evidence shown that intuitive eating is successful in helping people lose weight, even though it builds itself as an anti-weight loss diet, give or take, right? The studies are mostly conducted on white women, and it's done without a control group. That's not a very good study. And the studies that they do have, the health markers that they're showing for traditional weight loss plans versus IE are not particularly different. I'm not talking about the weight loss part of it, but any of the other aspects of it, right? Like if we're talking about any of the other health markers, they're not significantly different. So you're not seeing very many different health outcomes for IE. Last but not least, there is very little evidence to suggest that people who are successful, who can and do eat intuitively long term, are people who are obese to begin with. Not in any significant numbers, right? One or two examples aside, we just don't know if people who have had a troubled history with eating can learn to eat intuitively. You cannot guarantee that IE is going to work for everyone. You cannot guarantee to somebody who's had an orthorexic eating past that IE is something they can adopt and that it should work for them. There's just no evidence to suggest that, personal anecdotes aside. And you guys know I'm not a big fan of anecdotes. As far as I'm concerned, anecdotal evidence is the weakest form of evidence. Well, not even as far as I'm concerned. Everybody says this. I don't know why I had to personalize it so much, like I came up with it. Anecdotal evidence is the weakest form of evidence, which is why I'm not going to put much credence in it. Principle 1. Reject the diet mentality. Throw out the diet books and magazine articles that offer you the false hope of losing weight quickly, easily, and permanently. Get angry at diet culture that promotes weight loss and the lies that have led you to feel as if you were a failure every time a new diet stopped working and you will gain back all of the weight. If you allow even a small hope to linger that a new and better diet or food plan might be lurking around the corner, it will prevent you from being free to rediscover intuitive eating. Now, when it comes to IE, and the interpretation that I have seen online has been mostly in the realm of diet bad, and food good, body smart. There's no nuance to any of these ideas. And all diet is presented as being equally as bad. All diets are presented as being evil. The thought of dieting is presented as being evil. And all food is equal. All food is great. I even saw somewhere someone saying that like fruit and chocolate will have like the same emotional value and they'll like be the exact same to you. They're never going to be the same. Okay. Peaches are delicious, but it ain't no chocolate. And, just other stuff like that. Like there's no nuance. There's no gray area. It's very nail and hammer approach to everything. Number 2, honor your hunger. Keep your body biologically fed with adequate energy and carbohydrates. Otherwise, you can trigger a primal drive to overeat. Once you reach the moment of excessive hunger, all intentions of moderation, conscious eating are fleeting and irrelevant. Learn to honor this first biological signal, sets the stage for rebuilding trust in yourself and in food. This is as good a place as any to point out that intuitive eating does not make a distinction between fad diets such as very low fat, raw till 4, 80-10-10, the starch solution, keto, carnivore, and say the plate method, which is something that's endorsed by most accredited dietetic associations. As far as they're concerned, if you want to eat it, you should eat it, and any restriction is bad restriction. Another thing I want to point out in relation to principle number 2 is that not everyone has the luxury of taking time out and addressing hunger when they are hungry. For example, moms with little kids sometimes don't get breaks at all. People who have to work through lunch might not get a break. People who don't have the ability to take time out of their day. Maybe you are a frontline worker and you're busy all day. I've said before and I'll say it again, my brother is a doctor and he's had many times where he's had to skip lunch, and sometimes he goes in at 5 a.m. in the morning and he doesn't even really have breakfast. So that while this principle is nice in theory, and of course everybody should try and address their hunger when they feel hungry so as to not get to the point of binging and overeating, it's not always a possibility for everyone. Number 3, make peace with food. Call a truce. Stop the food fight. Give yourself unconditional permission to eat. If you tell yourself that you can't or shouldn't have a particular food, it can lead to intense feelings of deprivation that build into uncontrollable cravings and often binging. When you finally give in to your forbidden foods, eating will be expressed with such intensity it usually results in Last Supper overeating and overwhelming guilt. The problem with this is that one of the principles of IE is number 3, right? I think it's number 3. One of the principles of intuitive eating is to give yourself unconditional permission to eat any food that you want. While inherently that isn't a negative thing, unfortunately what that can mean is that people who already have an issue with overeating on calories can end up eating a lot more calories than they mean to. They're going to eat until whatever they feel they've been satisfied with. And a lot of times those foods aren't going to be foods like celery and carrot sticks, right? It's going to be the junky, fatty, salty, delicious stuff like kettle corn. It's going to be like kettle corn and flaming hot Cheetos and like nacho sauce and just stuff like that, right? The delicious stuff that we like to eat. It's not going to be lean meats and roasted vegetables. It's just not. Hyperpalatable foods are hyperpalatable for a reason. So unfortunately, because of that, we might end up raising our set point average. And the easiest way to stay healthy is to stay thin, unfortunately, right? And it's easier to stay thin than it is to become thin. Diets fail. They have a very high failure rate. Not the 95% failure rate that everybody loves to throw around, by the way. We'll get into that at some later point. But the failure rate for diets is very high, and the regain rate for diets tends to be very high as well. So you need to understand that being thin, staying thin is much, much easier than becoming thin will ever be, because you're fighting against a biological imperative. Compensatory mechanisms are a real thing. They're not as big a thing as Abby Sharp makes them out to be, but you know, what else can I say about that? If you guys haven't seen my video, well, I'll throw it up. Eat right. Try and do your best with your exercise and stay fit. Becoming fit is a huge challenge and not one that should be undertaken lightly, or one that has a very high rate of success, to be frank. Why does everyone think that people only eat because of emotion? Because there's a lot of times in my life where I've eaten because there was an emotion. Like, for example, I got really busy working and then I forgot to eat lunch and then I got to dinner and then I was starving and then I just ate a bunch of garbage and then immediately felt sick. That had nothing to do with emotion. I just totally forgot because I was so engrossed in other stuff. There's been times where I've been at a function or event or just like at a dinner or something and the food was just so yummy that I thought to myself, I'm going to have another piece. I know that it might not make me feel the best later, but man, this is so good. And I don't want to miss out later. And you know what? That happens. Sometimes you just sit there in front of a TV watching something and you end up eating way too much kettle corn and then you feel nauseous and then you feel sad and then you tell partner to buy you more kettle corn because you're trapped in an endless cycle of kettle corn. Anyway, what I meant to say was that sometimes you mindlessly eat. It happens, right? Why is it that every person who promotes IE seems to say that, well, you're sad, that's why you're eating? I'm not sad. I just like eating this thing. Sometimes people just want to eat things because they taste good. Once more, hyperpalatable foods are hyperpalatable for a reason. And IE doesn't even account for food reward. Now, hyperpalatable foods are considered hyperpalatable for a reason. Our bodies want them. Our bodies crave them sometimes even. And this is not one size fits all, right? Like, not all foods that are considered hyperpalatable are going to impact everybody the same way. Somebody might really like chips while other people really like candy. It doesn't mean that, you know, that's like the same person, right? Some people are just drawn towards certain foods, and the degree to which they affect any individual is, of course, going to depend on that particular person, their life history, their just socioeconomic status, emotional health, and yeah, even biology is going to impact it, how susceptible you are to those things. But they do impact everyone, right? They do affect everybody. And to discount that and just say, well, it's all psychological, is to really do the science there a lot of discredit. There's also the fantastic phenomenon of sensory-specific satiety, right? That's when you're totally full. You've just had a delicious meal that your mom has made, and then, you know, someone brings out the chocolate cake, and you think, well, I'll just have a tiny piece, right? I have a special dessert stomach. It's not a dessert stomach. You were content until you saw something that you really wanted that satisfied some other part of your palate, right? And The problem with that is that people can just jump back and forth. They can have something sweet, then they can have something salty, then they can have something sweet, and they can have something salty. And they can just switch back and forth, and they can forever just be eating hyperpalatable foods and never really get sick of them. So the idea that you can take away their emotional power and then you can eat them and they won't have any impact on you is just, it's ludicrous, quite frankly. Number 4, challenge the food police. Scream aloud no to thoughts in your head that declare you're good for eating minimal calories or bad because you ate a piece of chocolate cake. The food police monitor the unreasonable rules that diet culture has created. The police station is housed deep in your psyche, and its loudspeaker shouts negative barbs, hopeless phrases, and guilt-provoking indictments. Chasing the food police away is a critical step in returning to intuitive eating. I agree with principle number 4 in the sense that you should not moralize food. You are not good for eating one food or bad for eating another food. But there is such a thing as good foods and bad foods. There are foods that are inherently good for you, and there are foods that are inherently overall bad for you. That is not an indictment of your character. That is not a reflection of you as a person. It's a reflection of the food. Eating them does not mean anything about you. That said, if you are experiencing a moment of, well, I shouldn't be eating this, a voice inside of you telling you that you shouldn't be eating this, maybe take a second to assess why, you feel that way, instead of simply dismissing it out of hand or accepting it out of hand. Is this the sentiment that's echoed by your doctor when you went to go meet him or her? Or is this a sentiment that was echoed by a school bully on the play yard? You just want to make sure that you're not dismissing the voice of reason in your head along with the voice of potential detractors when you just say no altogether. Number 5, discover the satisfaction factor. The Japanese have the wisdom to keep pleasure as one of the goals of a healthy life. In our compulsion to comply with diet culture, we often overlook one of the most basic gifts of existence, the pleasure and satisfaction that can be found in the eating experience. When you eat what you really want in an environment that is inviting, the pleasure you derive will be a powerful force in helping you feel satisfied and content. By providing this experience for yourself, you will be able to find what it takes to eat just the right amount of food for you to decide you've had enough. Satisfying every craving is not possible. You might not have the money for it. You might not have the availability for it. You might not be able to replicate that dish. If I want something that my grandmother made, that is unfortunately no longer an option open to me. It just isn't. It doesn't matter how badly I crave it. I can't satisfy that craving. I couldn't probably even make anything as good as she made it, right? So that avenue is closed to me. If I make something that I wanted to eat and then I try it and I don't like it, throwing that food away might not be in the cards for somebody who can't afford more groceries, who can't afford to buy and eat everything that they want. And from an environmental point of view, how wasteful is that to be throwing food away like that? How awful is it from just a moral point of view to be throwing away perfectly good food just because it wasn't exactly to your satisfaction? How much privilege does that speak of, that you're just wasting food like that? What about dietary restrictions? What about restrictions made on the basis of religions, right? So Hindus who don't want to eat beef, or Muslims who don't eat pork, or Orthodox Christians who don't eat, or Orthodox Jews who don't eat pork. What about that? What if the thing that they crave is something that they had once by mistake, but because of religious moral reasons, they don't eat it? Then what? What are you supposed to do with that craving then? And what about stuff that affects your hunger, right? What if you are somebody who's prescribed medical marijuana for anxiety or for pain or for whatever X, Y, and Z reasons, or even if you just take it recreationally if it's legal where you are? What about it in that case? Because that can give you the munchies, right? How does that play into it? Are we just supposed to overeat because of a drug-induced state that we are put in? That doesn't really seem to fit with intuitive eating, but the idea of restriction also doesn't really seem to fit in with intuitive eating. Number 6, feel your fullness. In order to honor your fullness, you need to trust that you will give yourself the foods that you desire. Listen for the body's signal that tells you are no longer hungry. Observe the signs that show that you are comfortably full. Pause in the middle of eating and ask yourself how the food tastes and what your current hunger level is. I fundamentally don't have too much of an issue with principle number 6. It's pretty much the same as principle number 2. This is a luxury. Most people don't have the time to sit down and pause in their eating and think about how the food tastes and what their hunger level is and whether or not they're still hungry. Most people have a very short window in which they have to eat and get back to work, especially if you're, say, working in the fields. You might not even have that luxury. You might be multitasking. So there's a certain level of privilege that comes with intuitive eating. And to make it sound universal is to really dismiss all of that. That said, I do fundamentally agree with this principle. I do think that if you have the availability, you should sit down, eat slowly, and check in with yourself to see if you're full or not, because it takes a little bit of time for your stomach and your brain to sort of sink and realize that you're actually full. Number 7, cope with your emotions with kindness. First, recognize that food restriction, both physically and mentally, can, in and of itself, trigger loss of control, which can feel like emotional eating. Find kind ways to comfort, nurture, distract, and resolve your issues. Anxiety, loneliness, and boredom, and anger are emotions we all experience throughout life. Each has its own trigger, and each has its own appeasement. Food won't fix any of these feelings. It may comfort for the short term, distract from the pain, or even numb you, but food won't solve the problem. If anything, eating for an emotional hunger may only make you feel worse in the long run. You'll ultimately have to deal with the source of the emotion. Another problem that I have is the way that intuitive eating is marketed towards people. Intuitive eating is billed as being the one-size-fits-all solution. And unfortunately, it's not. If you are a person who's undergoing chemotherapy, right? If you are a cancer patient, your appetite is going to be significantly decreased. You have to make yourself eat, even if you don't want to, even if it makes you a little bit sick. Sometimes it's a necessity. When you're not feeling well, when you have the cold, when you have the flu, when you have COVID, you have to make yourself eat. None of those really fit into the guiding principles of intuitive eating, the way that it's understood on the web, right? I'm not talking about the catch-all backend that's built into the book that Riche and Tribole wrote. I'm talking about the way that intuitive eating is understood and promoted online, which is what most people are going to see. I don't care about the actual facts of it, right? Those are unfortunately very irrelevant. All that matters is what other people feel about it. And promoting it to everyone means that you're promoting it to those people as well. It means that you're promoting it to people who have psychological issues, who are using food as a compensation method. It's not going to work, and it's going to end up doing them more harm than good. And I know that the principle is, treat your emotions with kindness, but not everybody has the ability to build an entire team around them, to pay for a psychiatrist, for a therapist, for a doctor, for, a physical trainer. Not all of us have those people available to us. We have to make do with what we are given, and giving these same guiding principles to those people without all of the additional support needed to make a plan like intuitive eating successful. It's a problem. That's a really big downfall of this plan. I don't like anyone who tells you that they have one solution for everyone is trying to once more pull one over on you. That is never true, unfortunately. As a race, we're pretty diverse. Number 8, respect your body. Accept your genetic blueprint. As a person with a shoe size of 8, you would not expect to realistically squeeze into a size 6. It is equally futile and uncomfortable to have a similar expectation about body size. But mostly, respect your body so that it can feel better about who you are. It's hard to reject that diet mentality if you are unrealistic and overly critical of your body size or shape. All bodies deserve dignity. Once more, we come back to give your body unconditional permission to eat. And once more, I'm going to say to this, raising your set point is very easy. Basically, the way your set point works is that you have a range in which your body is comfortable. That does not mean that is a range at which your body is healthy. It's just where your body wants to be. historically, having extra fat on you meant that if there was a period of starvation, you would be able to fare better, which means that people try to basically keep a little extra fat on them. Your body's evolved to keep a little bit of extra fat on you. Nowadays, with our overabundance of food, that same inclination means that we tend to eat way too much and tend to accumulate way too much fat on us, and it's hard for us to get rid of. And as you gain weight, your set point average actually goes up. To lower your set point average takes a very long period of time. I think I read somewhere that it was 6 months, but I'll throw information on the screen just so that I'm sure. And so your set point average goes up as you gain weight. So say if your body was comfortable at 180 pounds and then you gain 20 and then you maintain 20 for a little bit, and now your body is happy at 200 pounds and then 250 pounds and then 300 pounds. And then you get to the point like Amber Lynn where you are comfortable, where your body is comfortable at almost 600 pounds. Is that where you're healthy? Absolutely not. But that is where your body is now set, quote unquote. Our bodies aren't intuitive. Our bodies don't know what they're doing. They're a set of biological functions used essentially to keep us alive, right? All of our intelligence is stored right here. It's in our brains. Whether we understand it or not is of course a different thing, but we are not divorced from our body. Our bodies are us, we are our bodies. That's just kind of how it works. And this is one of the problems with intuitive eating. All the studies that we have had so far that have been done on intuitive eating have been done with an RD and a therapist. And that in and of itself will impact the way that intuitive eating is implemented, right? When all of your studies are done with this additional support built in, but then in the real world, when these theories are being put into application, not just by dietitians, but by just an average Joe who read this book and wants to do this, all of that is going to be based on all the information that they have with them, right? You might have an RD, but you might not necessarily have a therapist to guide you through this. You might have a therapist, but you might not necessarily have an RD. You might have both, but they're both terrible at implementing, or they both don't know what they're doing about it or doing correctly, or they both are giving you inadequate advice, or you have neither and all you have is this book, or you don't even have the book and you're relying on people like Abby Sharp on the internet to give you the advice. And all of the advice they're going to be giving you then might not be enough for you because they're not going to be the circumstances in which these studies were conducted. And these, even with all of that support, the studies still only give mediocre results. Number 9, movement. Feel the difference. Forget military exercise. Just get active and feel the difference. Shift your focus to how it feels to move your body rather than the caloric burning effects of exercise. If you focus on how you feel from working out, such as energize, it can make the difference between rolling out of bed for a brisk walk or hitting the snooze alarm. Principle number 9 is great. I agree with it 100%. You should absolutely focus on the benefits of exercise and honestly find ways of exercise that you enjoy. I myself do not like going to the gym. I think sweating in public is absolutely disgusting, and if I could make everybody stop as a whole, I would. Unfortunately, I cannot. I do love going for hikes though, because I like being able to do a thing. I like the feeling of accomplishment it gives me, and I love looking at the beautiful views that a lot of times hiking can provide me with. So find things that you enjoy and do those things. That being said, this is principle number 9 out of 10 principles. We need to put more emphasis on exercise, not just in the intuitive eating movement, but in any movement as a society as a whole. The lack of emphasis on exercise, I think, has really led to an increase in lethargy in children in particular. I think encouraging them to find joy in exercise is a great thing. It's not about punishment. It's about letting them explore different forms of activity so that they can have fun while they do it. And I think adults should have that same thing. I think waiting until you get all the way to the end of your journey before trying to find joyful movement is, well, it seems counterproductive. Number 10, honor your health, gentle nutrition. Make food choices that honor your health and taste buds while making you feel good. Remember that you don't have to eat perfectly to be healthy. You will not suddenly get a nutrient deficiency or become unhealthy from one snack, one meal, or one day of eating. It's what you eat consistently over time that matters. Progress, not perfection, is what counts. Look, I don't have the answers to all of these questions. I am not an expert in intuitive eating, but the reason why I bring up all these problems is that I don't think any one of them has been adequately addressed by anyone really on the internet. I think the closest has actually been Abby Sharp's video for All That I Riff On Her, and even that video has massive issues and problems that I don't think she's ever really fully addressed or coherently addressed. And the reason that I know that that there's massive problems with it and that they haven't been addressed is because of step 10, gentle nutrition. Essentially what it says to me is that we have to understand that nutrients are important, that eating nutrient-dense food is important, and that we have to learn to say no sometimes. I know that intuitive eating is all about adding things and not taking things away, which is a principle that I believe in very fervently as well. I think that thinking of things as you can't have this versus how about you add this generally helps people eat better. But at the same time, if the first 9 steps are about eating whatever you want and potentially putting yourself in a position where you are at risk for worse health outcomes, and then you're saying, well, maybe now try doing something good for yourself, it's just seems extremely counterproductive. It's like taking 3 steps backwards only to be told, well, now you have to walk straight again. You just put me so much further behind, you know? Anyway, I hope this video was informative. I hope it gave you a little bit of an idea of what I think when it comes to intuitive eating. I know that this maybe isn't a point of view that everybody agrees with. And if you've got a different opinion, please do leave it down below. I'm perfectly willing to hear it. This is just something that I care about immensely. And it's not that I hate intuitive eating. It's not that I hate intuitive eaters. Nothing of that sort. I think there's some great principles within this movement. I just don't like the way that it's being marketed. I don't like the way that it's being portrayed on the internet. And I don't like how it's being billed as the cure-all for every person. Most importantly, I don't like how it's distracting from the real problem of obesity, because obesity is a genuine issue. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. If you hated it, you can give me a thumbs down. That's totally okay. I respect everybody's opinion here. Leave me a comment down below if there's something you'd like me to really know. Subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. Hit the notification bell and hit all if you want to know when I upload any video right away. I've got all my social medias linked down below. I've got Instagram, where I put up my food stuff and my life stuff, but I don't have a life stuff right now, so it's just food stuff. But I'm a pretty good cook, so there's that content. You can follow me on Twitter. Twitter is basically where I'm a little bit petty and a little bit toxic, but it's also where you can interact with me the easiest. So if you're interested in that kind of content, that's where you can find it. And there's Patreon. Think of Patreon as the tip jar for the internet. So if you like the job that I'm doing and you want to toss a few coins in my direction, that's where you can do that. All of your funds will be used towards buying me another giant empty palette. Fun fact, very soon I'm going to be destroying every single Juvia's Place palette that I have, and probably quite a few of my ColourPop ones, and I'm going to be putting all of them into this giant empty double-sided thick boy. And I'm going to film it, and I'm going to put it up here with probably some weird commentary over it, because that sounds like fun. So if you want to help me do that, and also do it again maybe later on, considering tossing a few coins in my direction. You don't have to. It's not necessary. But hey, think about it. It's an important fund. Another way you can contribute to that fund, join us for the community. I don't have a name for the community still. I've gotten a couple of suggestions. Jazzy, I think, was one of them. I don't know how I feel about that. Right now, it's still called the unnamed community tab. So, the unnamed community. So if you guys have a better suggestion, please do let me know and I will consider it. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I'm Jasmine, the sequel, and I am not relatable. Peace. Well, if you like this video, give me a thumbs up. If you hated it, you can give me a thumbs down. Whew. Hair is being extra today. I know y'all are going to think that I styled my hair, and while that is a very sweet sentiment, I did not. Fun fact, I put my hair into a bun when it was slightly wet, and I did this on its own because Sometimes my hair likes me. Other times, not quite so much, because if you guys can't tell, it looks like mad greasy up here, even though it's literally only been a few hours since I washed it, because it hates me. Yay.